You've all heard of Bigfoot, Nessie, and the Chupacabra, but there are hundreds of different cryptids from all over the world. Well, realistically, at most, there's only one or two cryptids, and the rest are just myths and urban legends. But there are certainly hundreds of stories of different creatures hiding out there just out of sight. While most stories of cryptids tend to be a bit bizarre, today we're going to be looking at some of the absolute strangest cryptids from all around the world. It all began in April or May of 1955 when a businessman was traveling through Loveland, Ohio. The man was driving under a bridge near the Little Miami River when he saw three figures, each standing 3 to 4 feet tall. These humanoid creatures were described as having leathery skin, lopsided chests, and frog faces, complete with wide mouths and no lips. They also appeared to have a mastery of both tools and magic, as one of them held up either a stick or a metal wand above his head and sprayed sparks. This began the legend of the Loveland Frog, but it would be 17 more years until the next reported sighting, and this sighting was made by a Loveland police officer. He was driving around on patrol at about 1 a.m. when he saw the frogman fully illuminated by his car's headlights. At first, it was sitting in the road, like a frog, but when the car approached, it stood on its hind legs to climb over the guardrail and run back down to the river. 2 weeks later, another police officer saw the creature again in the same area. This officer opened fire and believed that it hit the monster, but it still managed to escape. Neither officer made an official report of the incident, but word quickly spread around town that there were additional and far more credible sightings of the Loveland Frog. The most recent sighting came in 2016 when Sam Jacobs and his girlfriend stumbled across the creature while playing Pokemon Go. Sam said to reporters, "We saw a huge frog near the water." Feeling the need to specify, he said, "Not in the game, this was an actual giant frog." He said that the frog stood 4 feet tall and walked on its hind leg, and because this was 2016, he had a phone and he took some pictures and video. Of course, the quality of those pictures and the video are about what you would expect with any cryptid sighting. Not very good. Those sightings of the magic-wielding frogman have remained rare. This monster still manages to captivate people's imaginations. It was even the basis of a 2014 musical titled Hot Damn, It's the Loveland Frog, which is the thing that really existed. As of 2023, the creature has also been named the official mascot of Loveland, Ohio. Half dog, half otter, all nightmare. The Dobarchu has been terrorizing County Leitrim in Ireland for centuries. Tales of the creature, also known as the King Otter or the Irish crocodile, go back to at least the 1600s, but the most famous story dates to 1722. According to the tale, Grace Connolly had walked down to Glenade Lake to wash some clothes. As the day dragged on, her husband Terence noticed that Grace had never returned. He walked down to the lake, where he saw the 15-foot-long Dobarchu sleeping atop his wife's bloody remains. She had been torn apart by the monster's large canine teeth, and it was now taking a nap after eating its fill. Terence quickly returned to his home, where he grabbed a dagger, and then he rode his horse back to the lake. He snuck up on the giant slumbering beast and plunged the dagger into its neck, killing it, but not before it had the chance to let out a blood-curdling scream, calling to its mate. When the second monster emerged, Terence hopped on his horse and tried to flee, with the Dobarchu staying in pursuit for miles all the way to the next county. After a 20-mile chase, he finally stopped at a local blacksmith's because his horse needed to be reshod. Terence explained the situation, and the blacksmith devised a plan. They would leave 2 horses by the gate as bait for the monster so that they could sneak up on it. The plan worked, and as the monster stooped down to devour the horses, Terence stabbed it from behind with his dagger, decapitating it. Aside from the fact that the monster in question was a 15-foot killer otter rather than a dragon or something, this sounds like your typical and somewhat tragic legend. However, there's more to this tale than just the story itself. There are also the gravestones of Grace and Terence, a popular tourist attraction for fans of the vicious cryptid. The writing on the graves has been worn down by the elements over the years and is mostly illegible at this point, though there are plenty of older accounts confirming that these are indeed their gravestones. But what has not faded from the gravestones are the tableaus that were carved above the text. Terence's grave depicts a man, presumably him, riding on a horse while holding a dagger in the air. On Grace's grave, there is an artist's depiction of the slumbering Dobarchu with a hand driving a dagger into its neck. This isn't proof that the story is true, of course, but it does lend some amount of legitimacy to the whole thing. Sightings have become rarer over the years, but people continue to spot the creature in various lakes around Western Ireland in modern times. Fortunately, no recent deaths have been attributed to the fearsome creature. It's impossible to say how far back the rumors of the Mongolian Deathworm go. Known in Mongolian as Olgoi Korkoi, or large intestine worm, the legend is deeply rooted in folklore and oral traditions. However, it was first introduced to the West by American adventurer Roy Chapman Adams in his 1926 book on the Trail of Ancient Man. In the book, Adams described a meeting of Mongolian officials who, for some reason, happened to have gotten onto the topic of the Deathworm. Although no one in attendance claimed to have personally seen it, they all believed it to be real. According to Mongolian Prime Minister Damdinbazar, it is shaped like a sausage about 2 feet long, has no head nor leg. It is so poisonous that merely to touch it means instant death. It lives in the most desolate parts of the Gobi Desert. Of course, other accounts claim that the Deathworm not only has a head, but that it has 2, or at the very least it has a circular opening on either end of its body, each lined with sharp fangs, both of which are capable of spitting highly toxic and corrosive venom at a target. That's not the Deathworm's only supposed method of attack either. It's claimed to be capable of stunning enemies with an electric discharge similar to that of an electric eel. If all else fails, the worm will embrace the idea of mutually assured destruction. If properly agitated and nearing defeat, the Deathworm will change color, let out a scream like billowing thunder, and force their bodies to explode, thus propelling their venom across a large area, which all sounds totally real, doesn't it? But look, even by cryptid standards, that description started to get a little bit ridiculous, and we recognize the thing is starting to sound more like something from the Dungeons and Dragons monster manual than an actual thing that people could possibly believe in. But believe in it, they did. Numerous expeditions were made to the Gobi Desert following the release of Adams's book in the hopes of finding a real Mongolian deathworm in the wild. Some of these trips were led by credible researchers who sought to discover if there was any truth to this legend. Others were led by cryptozoologists inspired by the movie Dune to use rhythmic thumping to try and bring the worms to the surface. The most recent expeditions have been made for reality shows searching for cryptids, though surprisingly, none of those shows have actually been filmed for the History Channel. So they're missing out a bit of a trick there, aren't they?
Boom. Roasted.
However, what's not a surprise is that nobody has found any evidence of the Deathworm or even anything remotely similar to the description. Everyone that lives there knows the stories, but few locals claim to have ever seen a Deathworm with their own eyes. Of those that do make such a claim, many were shown a Tartar sand boa, which they said was the same creature that they'd seen before. The boa is a far cry from the self-destructive killing machine described in the Deathworm stories. Not only are they completely harmless to humans, but they make really great pets on account of being a docile creature that's also slow-moving. But who knows? Maybe the Mongolian Deathworm really is crawling through the sands of the Gobi Desert. Everybody who reported going out in search of the worms came back empty-handed, but from the monster's description, it sounds like anybody who actually found one, well, just wouldn't have come back at all. Most cryptids, even the violent ones, aren't purported to have any particular agenda. Bigfoot doesn't hunt down campers who litter in the forest. He just wants to be left alone so he can do Bigfoot stuff. But that's not the case for the Rougarou, a cryptid that prowls the swamps of Louisiana. The name is a variant of the French loup-garou, the French word for werewolf, and both names are used interchangeably throughout Louisiana. Stories of these creatures exist throughout French communities across the globe, and many are extremely similar to the traditional werewolf folklore stories. But the Cajun Ruru is a different type of werewolf. It's on a mission, and that mission is to scare people into behaving. Like most werewolves, Rougarou hunt humans. However, in Louisiana, there are only 2 types of people they claim to prey upon: naughty children and Catholics that fail to observe Lent, which is very specific. Similar to other werewolves, the bite of a Rougarou has the power to turn the victim, assuming that victim wasn't simply mauled to death. In some versions of the story, the transformation isn't permanent. The person will be turned into a monster for 101 days, after which they can pass the curse to someone else by drawing their blood. This allows the original Rougarou to return to human form. But an attack from such a creature isn't the only way for a person to be transformed into a Rougarou. Some claim that the monsters were originally the creation of voodoo priestesses and that a priestess has the power to curse a person and transform them. Another way a person could become a Rougarou is by failing to observe Lent for 7 consecutive years. Again, very specific. Look, using stories about monsters to scare children into obedience is nothing new. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years, and it's unlikely to change anytime soon. However, what's peculiar about the Rougarou is that the legend also contains a loophole. If you're a naughty child, then the Rougarou will want to hunt you down and eat you. But there's also an easy method of self-defense. All somebody needs to do to defend themselves is place 13 small objects such as coins, rocks, or beans on their windowsills and at the threshold of each door. If a Rougarou wants to break into the house but sees these objects, it will first attempt to count them, but they are dumb creatures that can only count to 12. By placing 13 objects at the doors and windows, it will leave the monsters so confused that they're unable to enter the house, instead just standing there befuddled until the sun comes up and they revert back to human form. To anybody unfamiliar with the Rougarou, this certainly sounds like a story adults made up to scare children into being good little Catholics. However, there have been many reports of Rougarou sightings throughout Louisiana over the years. Sightings have become less frequent in recent years, but there are still many who firmly believe that they exist, and even those who trek into the bayou to hunt the creatures. Evidence for cryptids tends to be pretty scarce. It's usually a handful of stories from people who were either alone or only with one other person when they saw the creature in question. These stories are often set years or even decades apart from one another, and the best anyone ever has to offer along the lines of proof is a grainy photograph or 3 seconds of really bad blurry film. But that is not the case for Tranco. Tranco is unusual, not only because of the bizarre description of the beast, but because of how many witnesses there were. The creature appeared off the coast of Margate, South Africa on October the 25th, 1924. This wasn't a brief glimpse of something poking its head out of the water either. People watched for a full 3 hours as Tranco did battle with a pair of killer whales. Witnesses described the creature as being nearly 50 feet long, making it almost twice as large as the average killer whale. It had thick white fur like a polar bear, a lobster-like tail that it used to fend off the attacking whales, and a long trunk like an elephant, hence its name. To make sure everybody got a good look at the creature's bizarre properties, during the battle, it lifted itself 20 feet out of the water. Okay, so maybe this was just a case of mass hysteria, or perhaps because the battle was said to be taking place nearly a mile offshore, they were just misinterpreting what they were seeing. And these could be seen as fine possibilities were it not for what happened the next day. Following the defeat of the whales, an injured Tranco washed up on the beach. It was unconscious, but believed to be alive. Local farmer Hugh Balance decided to take precise measurements of the creature, which were detailed in an article in England's Daily Mail titled "Fish Like a Polar Bear." According to Hugh, Tranco was 47 feet long, his tail was 10 feet long and 2 feet wide, his white fur was 10 inches long, and the beast's trunk was 5 feet long and 14 inches wide. Interestingly, Tranco didn't have a head in the traditional sense. Instead, the trunk extended out from its torso where the head would normally have been. For 10 days, Tranco's body remained on the shore before disappearing. It is believed that he finally woke up and disappeared back into the sea. Despite all the witness statements about this incredible creature just laying there on the beach, no scientists ever came to investigate the body and see what they could make of it. That or all the scientists had been at least 11 days away from Margate and didn't make it there in time. While for a long time it was believed that no photos had been taken at the time, or at least none that still existed, in 2010 it was discovered that 4 photos had been published showing Tranco's body lying on the beach. Mainstream scientists tried to offer an explanation as to what the carcass in the photos could really be, but they had 10 days to look at the body back in 1924, and they didn't, so, well, it's too late now. As for the ultimate fate of Tranco, nobody knows. It's unclear whether this was a one-off abomination that happened to roam the ocean, or if there was an entire race of lobster-elephant whales. But if Tranco was the only one of his kind, then it is speculated that he is no longer among the living. In 2017, a carcass appeared on the shore of the Philippines, and the pictures of it bore a striking similarity to the photos taken in 1924. Many speculate that Tranco was a one-of-a-kind creature, and that the photos from 2017 showed the end of its journey.